Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Come unwrap some holiday magic this season in Denver, where the lights are brighter and the shopping is grander. The shows are more spectacular, the trees taller, the festivities merrier. So come for your holiday traditions or make some new ones with your friends and family in the Mile High City, where the season feels a whole lot more wonderful. Discover great hotels and more things to do at milehighholidays.com.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey guys, it's me, your host, Elena Grace, and you're listening to another episode of I've Been Thinking. So this was kind of a surprise episode. We are on with Appodlachia today with Big John and Chuck. Say hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
And we were actually planning on doing this little collab in the future, and a really great opportunity and idea presented itself. So we're going to be talking to you guys today about J.D. Vance and Hillbilly Elegy, and why, as Appalachians, we should learn from this experience. But we'll get more into that here in a minute. First, I want Big John and Chuck to introduce themselves to you.
All right. So easy enough. I'm Big John. I'm probably the loud one on the podcast. The other guy that you're going to hear from is probably the smarter one. So go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I mean, you are louder, but that's why I play with the sound levels when we do the editing, so it's all good. Chuck Cora, co-host with Big John over yonder. Both Parkersburg, West Virginia natives, and let's see, we've been doing this John. We are about a year in, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks.
I want to say December 19th, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Wow,
about 2 weeks.
congrats.
Thank you. We started this podcast after John's campaign for House of Delegates, West Virginia House of Delegates in 2018. John, and you can obviously speak more to that than I can.
Yeah, I mean, in West Virginia and Appalachia in general, there seems to be a movement towards a very conservative aspect and mindset. And Chuck and I, going into that, Chuck was essentially my campaign manager in that. We wanted to get a more, I won't say liberal, but to us a more well-versed mindset going. And so we ended up flipping an area that we lost the race, I'll be clear on that, but we ended up moving it, what was it, Chuck, like 13 points?
Yeah, it was something like that. I mean, it was substantial, and you got, I believe, more votes than any other Democrat had in that district ever, I believe.
So we knew we had something. We didn't want it to end there on just a campaign that we knew was only going to affect a certain area. So essentially, we thought this idea up for. I mean, it was actually a long time that we thought about this, and then put it into play about a year ago now.
Wow, that's really awesome. I think I had missed at some point that you started this with like your campaign, but that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it's one of those things that Chuck and I knew we had to do something, right. And a podcast seemed like we could reach enough people to where the messages that we were putting out there wouldn't get lost.
Yeah, I feel that 100%. One of my big things in life, I have always felt very called to be like somebody who breaks the stereotypes in the best way. You know, somebody who says, "Hey, this, like, the way the media portrays us as Appalachians, like, is very harmful. It creates a lot of problems for us, and we're not just what you see on the TV," right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm from Eastern Kentucky, from really close to Tennessee, and I'm actually further south, but not quite as far east as Breathitt County, where Hillbilly Elegy, kind of partly takes place.
What part of Kentucky are you from?
Knox County.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I used to live in Tennessee and worked all throughout East Tennessee, so been up around that area a bunch.
Yeah, I am from Knox County, and I am from the county. I don't live in, well, my parents don't. I live up close to Cincinnati now, but my parents don't live, in the city or anything. We live in the same area that my mom's family has been in for forever, and it's a really special place to me. I've been all around the world, and there is still nowhere like Knox County and Eastern Kentucky in general to me. And I just really, I want to make it a better place, and I want to inspire people to have a better opinion of it,
Absolutely. Yeah, totally understand that. Totally agree.
Yeah, so this book and now the movie, if you want to know, so I bought the book when it came out because, that was 2016. Nobody had, I think it was 2016 or 2015.
2016, I think.
Yeah, nobody had read it yet. I bought it when it was fresh, and I didn't know how it was going to be, and I wanted to give it a chance, right? Mm-hmm. And then I don't think I ever even finished it, to be completely honest with you.
Ringing endorsement right there.
Yeah, right. But
I'm gonna tweet that at JD.
To finish up that endorsement, it now lives on my bookshelf. So it is still there, but it is kind of like the flood wall between my plants and my books that I actually care about in case I overflow them. So that way, it keeps my other books protected.
That's the smartest, probably the best use for it, honestly.
Really,
right? That or like a coaster or something.
That's what I was thinking. Clean up messes or something.
Yeah. And it just kind of, the universe, the Lord just kind of gave that to me. I didn't do it on purpose. And then one day I did overflow a plant, and it was right there. And I was like, this is what it needs to be used for.
That's why JD wrote the book.
Right? Yeah. So I would love for you guys to talk a little bit to the listener, I guess. We're all Appalachians, but we have still our own unique experiences, and that's something that I will, I guess, kind of give JD the benefit of the doubt on, that he had his own experience, and that's fine. We all do. But the problem is that he took his experience and spoke for an entire group of people and said, this is the experience, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I think that's the chief issue that John and I have with it, and many people that we've spoken to, both on our show and in private life, the same. That's the chief complaint, I would say.
Yeah, that is. That's my number one complaint, is that I don't care if you talk about what your experience somewhere was. Like, I can go to a restaurant you love and not like it. Like, that's my right, that's your right, whatever. But I'm not going to say that's the worst restaurant ever in the whole entire world just because I didn't like it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, you know, one thing that was pointed out in a show that we did with Meredith McCarroll, who co-edited one of the response books to Hillbilly Elegy, was that, you know, there's no disagreement that J.D. Vance has the right to tell his own story, and there's no doubt that it's a compelling one, and that's not at all the issue, and I think a lot of times the criticism of the book is misinterpreted as that.
Yeah.
The issue is when he says "we" and refers to the region of Appalachia and what he refers to as hillbillies as we and us, that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, and the fact that he's not one of us. He's not from Appalachia. He grew up right outside of Cincinnati.
Yep.
Like, he went to high school in Middletown. He didn't go to high school at frickin' Jackson Central, you know? Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I would just say, like, you know, I think people make that point a lot, and I think it's a valid one. I think, though, I think more so is just that he is trying to use his experience to illustrate everybody's experience and to, I guess, diagnose a cultural problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, I mean, regardless of whether he was legitimately from Appalachia or not, I think is beside the point, from, like, the real issue being that he's got this arrogance to him where he's saying, because this happened to me and because I witnessed this one instance of someone being lazy at work or this one instance of somebody abusing the welfare system, that means that there's a humongous cultural problem, and that's the whole issue of an entire region, which is just, I think, a joke, honestly.
Yeah.
Hence the title of the book. I mean, he literally in the title says culture in crisis. I mean, so he tries to generalize his story to be Appalachia's story.
Yes.
No matter whether or not he identifies either way, the whole point here is J.D. Vance has, and this is, I guess, what angers me. I talked to Chuck about this. J.D. Vance and my story are pretty similar, right? Mm-hmm. But there was never a time when I started saying my family is the Appalachian family. I always thought my family was this certain scenario, right? And so J.D. Vance looks around at the community and essentially blames the community for how he grew up. I looked around the community and said, why can't my family be a lot like these other families?
Yeah.
And so J.D. Vance saw a cultural issue to the point of why his mom was the way she was and maybe why his grandma was a certain way. But in actuality, it wasn't a cultural issue. It was just the way his family was. I mean, it was the sociological perspective of it is that's his nuclear family. That's how it was. It wasn't the culture. It was his family. And so I think that's the problem is he continues to make an overgeneralized basis just based off the relationships that he has in his own life.
Right. That's super fair. I think that, you know, I guess I go to the he's not even from here thing because to me that's part of why he has this kind of
that's fair.
This attitude where he looks down on the culture that he's not a part of, but weirdly wants to be a part of because he kind of wants to be a victim of something that he's not really a victim of, when in reality, just like you said, it's a family issue here. And there may be some like greater cultural issues that play into that. But that's like a lot of different stuff. And that's just how that family coped with that. That's my family is nothing like his. And I am very blessed to say that. Yeah. And I'm very realistic in the fact that I had a very privileged upbringing. Even though it was in Appalachia, I still got the best education that I could in my area. My parents gave me all of the opportunities that they were able to. They, you know, went out of their way to make sure that I had a better life growing up than they did. They worked really hard to send me to a private university for undergrad. You know, all of those things, they set me up so that I could do whatever. I could stay in Appalachia if I wanted. I could travel the world. I could do whatever I wanted to do, but they set me up for that. And I recognize how blessed I am to be able to say that. But like, I know that I did not have the normal upbringing, because I know that my mom's Sunday school kids at church, like, they wear my hand-me-down clothes, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I have always been very aware that the neighbor kids, the Sunday school kids, like, you know, the people I see walking down the road to the gas station, like, they have a very different life than me, but I want their lives to be better. And I'm not going to blame them entirely for what they're experiencing. Like, to an extent, sometimes people are at fault, but you know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to blame an entire culture for that. And I'm also not going to put my experience as their own.
Yeah.
I rambled a little. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that makes sense. I think, like, when John and I talk about it, I think what we try to do is contrast what J.D. Vance says with our own experiences. And even though John and I grew up in the same hometown, went to the same high school, him and I had vastly different experiences growing up.
Right.
I grew up and my family, we struggled with money, and it wasn't because they were lazy, as
Right.
J.D. Vance may imply. My mom had to get a job when my dad was out of work because they went on strike because they were going to axe 50%, I think, of his retirement benefits at his work, and so, like, we struggled greatly because of that, but it wasn't because, you know, my family was lazy and they didn't, quote, pull themselves up by the bootstraps, which is something that J.D. Vance would imply. And I think, you know, John draws from a completely different but also, like, difficult experience. I won't speak to that. I can let John speak to that. But I think what we try to do is, you know, we use this and say, like, hey, you know, we also didn't have it easy. Now, I'm not trying to equate my experience with J.D. Vance's, but we also didn't have it easy. But we're not blaming a cultural problem on the issue, because there's so much more to Appalachia than just, like, from J.D. Vance's perspective. And,
Yes.
you know, we don't have to get into it at this very moment, but it's very clear that he wrote the book to kind of extol his own political virtues and set himself up for a political career by the way that he wrote it as a very, like, conservative tome to the working class, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, John, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that or about kind of your experience.
Well, I think you're right, though. I mean, and it is insane when you sit down and think about it. You know, Chuck and I grew up, maybe 5 miles apart in terms of, like, houses, and went to the same high school. And he's right. We had vastly different. He lived in a 2-parent household. I lived in a 1-parent household. My house was filled with domestic violence. His house was filled with love. It's one of those things that there's a sense of the ability to look at a region like Appalachia and say, I know why you're failing. Here's why. And
Yes.
I made a tweet a long time ago that I got flack about. And I said, if you want to fix Appalachia, move here. And a lot of people took that as, like, me saying that you can't help from the outside. But that's not really what I was saying. The whole fact is, people like J.D. Vance and people in California and people in Washington, they want to throw rocks into Appalachia and say, hey, I can fix you, but they don't want to come here and help. That's the big issue. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things that they continue to talk about how they understand the narrative. And like I said, Chuck and I's families, two very different aspects. That's, I think, what makes our show as good as it is, if I can toot our own horn for a second. But the big thing is, those are our stories. J.D.
Right.
Vance's story is his story. You said that at the beginning, and you're exactly right. It's his own story. But let's think about this too. The way, if he writes his book about really truly himself, that would be the most boring book of all time. It's a white dude who grew up in a privileged family, who went to Yale and clerked for a federal judge.
Yeah.
That's so boring. So
Yeah.
he has to throw in this dramatized, aspect of it and really hone in on it, which he did. The problem is he starts, like Meredith said in our interview, he stops using I and starts using we, and that's a
Yeah.
big issue.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I would never write a book about myself and say, "Oh, I'm the victim of Appalachia," because
Right.
I am a product of where I am from, but I am not a victim of it in any way. Because
That's a good aspect. Yep.
right, and like I have, we all have very different raisings, and we all have very different but also very similar backgrounds. But I'm not going to speak and say this was my experience, so this is a we experience. You know what I'm saying? Because I know that I did not have the we experience. Just like you guys didn't have a we experience. We each had our own.
Yeah, and it should be easy to look at that and say, like, okay, I want to really write a memoir, because that's what he defines Hillbilly Elegy as. He defines it as a memoir. But unfortunately, fortunately for him, but unfortunately for the rest of us, he decided that memoir, which I always say he bills as a memoir. It's not truly a memoir. It's a dramatized novel. Let's be honest. And it was always intended to make money. It was always intended to make a movie, and it was always intended to help him try to win an election, which unfortunately for him, he has a lot of trouble doing in a state like Ohio, especially because there's been talks that he wants to challenge Senator Brown, and he's not going to win that. So this was really the time for him to run. I hope that he never runs, in all honesty. But let's be frank. Like, J.D. Vance is smart. Like, there's no saying that he's not an intelligent guy. He knew what he was doing. He's planned this his entire adult life. Like, that's the way he is.
Oh, absolutely. He conniving in a way. He figured out how to use this small experience that he had, throw an entire humongous group of people under the bus with it to boost himself up.
Yeah, exactly. He's really good at throwing people under the bus, as long as it's not him. If he can throw someone under the bus and tell people that he went to Yale, he's had a hell of a day. That is his big day.
Well, and I think the problem comes in is that most people don't see that side of the story, like the side of Hillbilly Elegy of him calling, people poor as lazy and propping up payday lenders. What they see is the story, and what they're told is a story, and that's essentially what the movie tells. And, like, one of the reasons why we wrote a couple of op-eds saying don't watch the movie is that we don't want that false narrative about him, about Hillbilly Elegy, reinforced, because so many people view him as sort of the whisperer of the region, like the horse whisperer of Appalachia, and it couldn't be anything further from the truth or further from accurate. And so I think that's something that we've really latched onto, which is like, we don't have the quite the reach of Netflix yet, hoping to get there.
Yeah, take that, Ron Howard.
Yeah, that's right, Ron Howard. We're not quite at Arrested Development level just yet, but wait a few months. But what we're trying to do is just, like, as much as we can, and with as much incremental progress as we can, try to, like, inform people that there is another story, and there's a lot more stories, and most of them are not like what J.D. Vance is telling you. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, it's getting people to understand that this guy was propped up. He had a New York Times best-selling book turned into a movie, does a TED Talk here and there, but that's, it's held up as this is the true story of Appalachia. This is, like, what the problem is. Here's the doctor diagnosing the problem. What we're trying to do is say, hell no, that's not it. Here's some other people, plural, and their stories.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I appreciate that so much as an Appalachian. Like, I am so grateful for people who are trying to make that difference and say there are other stories. And like I said earlier, I want to be one of those people too, who says, hey, there are other stories. Here's some examples. So back, I guess it was back in this spring, I think, like before COVID in March. So it was like January, February, I want to say. I went to a reading with some, I think, like 5 of the authors of Appalachian Reckoning. And I am an emotional wreck, okay? Like, I have to preface this with that. And especially before that point in my life, I had not gone on anxiety medication yet, so I was even more of an emotional wreck. So I sat through their readings, and I barely contained my sobs, like, during their readings. And I went up to speak to a few of the authors, and I cannot for the life of me right now remember their specific names. But I know one was a woman, and the other one I want to say was from Harlan County. But I told them both, I cried when I talked to them, and I said, I have never felt so like represented in a piece of literature about Appalachia before I heard these pieces that you guys read tonight, right?
That's awesome.
And that was just a really cool experience for me, because that was kind of a moment of realization of how important representation is, right? Because, like, I guess I had never felt not represented because I'm a white blonde woman. Like, you can find a white blonde woman anywhere. But actually seeing or hearing, something that is my experience represented was just like this incredible moment for me. And that's my biggest issue, kind of like we've said with Hillbilly Elegy, is that he's speaking on behalf of a people he's speaking from his experience, but he's saying this is the experience. And the thing is, though, that we don't need to be spoken for. Like, Appalachians have our own voices. We just need, like, a microphone, And he took our whole entire microphone from us.
That's a great, I don't know if it's an analogy or metaphor. I never get those right, but whatever it is. That is very accurate. Is he leave it to a white guy that graduated from Yale to steal the microphone from people.
Literally. Literally.
Write a whole book about how people don't listen to him. That's
irony dripping from it. Yeah,
dripping.
That's our bud JD. That's
our old cousin JD.
Yeah, something.
But I think that that's something that we can all learn from this experience and I think it's something that I want Appalachians, I think, to learn from this experience, is if you feel misrepresented by the way the media portrays us, which we always feel that way. Anytime they go to Knox County, or I'm sure to your county in West Virginia, anytime they go there, they find the one person with no teeth, with the thickest accent you've ever heard, who's not been out of a holler in 15 years. And they put
You saw Dark Waters too?
See, they put that person on TV to talk to, the whole state, or sometimes like the whole country. If something terrible happens, God forbid, they choose that person, not the 7 articulate people that are also there. They always choose the person that fits the narrative that they want to fill,
Right. Yep.
And I want Appalachians to realize that, hey, if you don't like being misrepresented like this, don't allow other communities to be misrepresented also. Does that make sense? Like, I want it to be a moment of realization for us all where we're like, holy shit, we hate this, but we perpetuate stereotypes of other communities, so maybe we shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's something that, since we started this show, I've found myself really checking myself with other communities, like New Jersey has a lot of really, entrenched stereotypes based on media narratives. California, same thing. And,
true.
The South, my God, there's so many stereotypes, and having lived there for a good chunk of time, I can, it's a lot more complicated and a lot more diverse and powerful than most people portray it. But one thing I would say is, one of the really cool things that's come out of this discussion, especially like the discussion around Hillbilly Elegy that John and I have been having, is and this kind of started actually born in part out of my wife telling me, talking to me like, your stuff is really good, but like, it often can come off as negative. And I sat back and I was like, you're right. Like, we are really just focusing on like the negativity coming from this book. What's something that we can do that's more positive? And John and I kind of had a thought about that, and we decided, well, why don't we, instead of just saying like, don't read Hillbilly Elegy and trashing this terrible book, why don't we refer people to other things that they can read instead from people from Appalachia? And so we came up with like a huge list, John. I don't even know how many people, books, things are on it.
It's really big.
It's insane.
Hundreds and adding to it more every day. But as a resource for people to, hear from other Appalachians or hear other stories, because if we can, prop up other voices than J.D. Vance, that's one of the best things that we can try to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I really admire that you guys have taken that opportunity with this to pass a microphone to other voices, to other Appalachian voices, to try to take that attention back on the people who are actually experiencing these things and speaking for themselves and not for a whole. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that was our intention, and we've said it a lot, and I know a lot of people say this and they're not truthful, but our intention is and always will be that the bigger, even as small as we are now, but the bigger that we get, we will continue to only represent the region. Like that's the reason why we're doing this. Is not to make it as like some big podcast or something like that. Obviously, we love that a lot of people listen, but besides the point, if we can continue to use our platform to help other people come along. So, I mean, for instance, we now have this new thing on our podcast where we play, Appalachian artists every episode. And so, and we always make sure that we tag them and put them in stuff because we want them to get notoriety, because people may not know this, but there are like hellacious bands in Appalachia that are being ignored simply because they're in Appalachia. I mean, they are really good.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if we can get more people to listen to them and support them, and we still list of small businesses, if we can have people support them, that's the goal here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I think I was listening to your Appalachian Identities episode yesterday, and you said at some point during that, I want to say it was that episode, you said, either we'll bring them with us or they'll bring us with us, but either way, we're going somewhere.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's probably true.
I loved that, though, because that is how we should approach that, especially from a greater community like ours, like Appalachia. We should try to empower each other. We shouldn't have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We should be giving each other a hand,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a baseball team. For the longest time, Appalachia has only been playing with a pitcher. It needs the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing here is we're trying to create the rest of the team to bring them along and hopefully, terrible analogy, but hopefully win a World Series, because that's the goal. And it's obviously to bring Appalachia into the other regions' perspectives. So like Midwest gets all of this like, pride thrown at them, and it's almost like looked down to be from Appalachia at times. We don't want that anymore. Our whole goal is to get onto that level. And Chuck and I can't do that. We're not going to put the region on the map. The whole
Speak
region
for
has
yourself.
to do it. Sorry, I forgot that Chuck was the next J.D. Vance. The region has to do it together.
Certainly forgot that.
I did forget. I forgot to mention that at the start of the show.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, as soon as I get my acceptance letter from Yale, still waiting on that one. It's been about 5 years.
Yeah, I think I got waitlisted.
I'm dead. That's really good. One of my college friends, he ended up going to Harvard. I'm gonna have to tell him that he really is the next J.D. Vance. I don't know how he'd take that.
Ooh.
Hopefully,
I
not
hope
well.
I hope he doesn't take it as a compliment.
I don't think he would.
And just to be clear, going to Ivy League is not a bad thing.
No,
and
it's not.
I got to state that for the record, though, because
Yeah.
I think it's Cassie Chambers, who I believe she's actually a Louisville City Councilwoman now, but she grew up in, I think, a rural part of Kentucky and went to Harvard. She wrote a really fantastic book called Hill Women, which is on our list.
Mm-hmm.
On our
Yes.
list. Also wrote a great piece in The Atlantic pushing back against Hillbilly Elegy too recently. But
Good for her.
That list actually just hit 1.3 million impressions on Twitter. So even though we're not Netflix, we did get it across to a lot of people, and that was
right.
the goal.
Wow.
That was the goal with it. So.
Really proud of you. I mean, I know I've shared that list on Facebook at least once, and I've
Yeah.
shared it on Instagram a few times as well. So I'm sure it has more impressions than just what you're seeing on Twitter.
Right, it's all over. We're really
Oh, yeah.
happy with it, and we're happy to everybody. I think I always crack up because there's always a lot of people who like DM us and are like, "Hey, real quick, could you add me to the list?" Like, it's just somebody like we missed or something
Yeah.
like that. But then we also have the other side of the spectrum, which always cracks me up too. Is like we misrepresented something, like we put poetry in fiction or something. And
yeah.
we have to scramble and hopefully try to fix that. So.
And then there's a few that go onto their fainting couch and say that I can't believe you didn't include
Oh my God.
like my dog Skip or something.
Yeah, how did
Yeah.
you not do this?
How could you not have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone on there?
Yeah, J.K. Rowling's Appalachian or something?
Something.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I can definitely see that being a hot mess. Trying to make everybody happy. It never happens.
It does not.
No, you'll never do it. Yeah. Well, guys, I guess we can start wrapping up. I know that you all have something to do after this, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Normally at this point, I would ask you for resources to suggest, but what I'm going to do is I'm just not even going to ask you for that. And I'm going to, in the blog post that I make about this episode, I'm going to include a link to your list of Appalachian authors, et cetera, to look at, instead of Hillbilly Elegy, if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, please do. And I think if you have like the links to the Google Sheets, I think they're public, so you can edit them yourself. We're trusting people's goodwill that they won't try to screw with that, but we wanted it open so that people can continue adding to it.
Right. No, I think that's awesome. I hope that nobody puts J.K. Rowling on there. But we'll see. I think it'll be okay. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, yeah.
Fingers crossed, we'll see. We start pissing too many people off, though, who knows what they'll put on
Oh,
there.
that's so true. Yeah.
We're getting there.
Well, guys, I am so grateful that you all came on here and talked with me about this. And I think that we really did drive home the point that the biggest issue is that J.D. Vance is speaking for a group of people who doesn't need spoken for.
Yep,
You know?
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I said, I really want this to be an inspiration for other Appalachians to take initiative and do for others what they would have be done for them, basically.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it.
Love
Well, thanks
it.
for having us.
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you guys. It was great being on here. I actually will ask you to go ahead and plug your Instagram, where can we find you? Tell us once again the name of your podcast, all that stuff.
Sure. Appodlachia, Appodlachia. And I think that's the same handle on all social medians, and you can also find us on appodlachia.com. And John, if you should plug the awards show that we're having.
Yeah, that's the other thing we're doing, which I always joke around that I started this so I could finally be an award show host, which may or may not be true. But really, the whole goal here is to really talk about some awesome Appalachians. 2020 has sucked, so we want to make sure that people's work does not doesn't get thrown to the side. So we started an award show. That link is actually going to be released, well, now, by the time you listen to this now. So voting all the way up until December 23rd. I have no idea when you're playing this, but all the way up
Friday.
all the way up till December 23rd. So you still have time. You can go to any of our social media accounts and find the link there. We hope that you vote. Our whole goal is to get all of these names out and really to make this award show the best it could possibly be.
Incredible. I am so excited about that. That's really cool. All right, guys. Well, once again, thank you so much for being on. All right. So for y'all listeners, thank you for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. I hope that it has been enlightening, especially if you're not from Appalachia. And if you are, I hope it's been inspirational to motivate you to look at things a little bit differently, right? Y'all make sure that you subscribe to the Patreon for early access to episodes and for extra content. $5 a month, you get early episodes every week. Make sure that you give us a follow on Instagram at I've Been Thinking Pod. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Subscribe wherever you listen so you get a little reminder. And if you use Apple Podcasts, definitely give us those 5 stars. Give us a rave review. All right. Thanks for listening, y'all. And I will talk at y'all next week. Say bye, boys.
Bye.
Thanks. See y'all.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Salutations, my fellow food lovers. This is Chef Mark here from Johnny's Italian Steakhouse, and I want to tell you about our filet Oscar. This premium filet is topped with Johnny's lump crab cake, grilled asparagus, and our signature béarnaise sauce. But the start to any great night always begins with a killer appetizer. And I recommend trying out our jumbo pan-seared sea scallops with Brussels sprout slaw tossed in Johnny's hot bacon dressing. It is so good. I know that you will love my filet Oscar as much as I love preparing it. So come to Johnny's tonight. Johnny's Italian Steakhouse, Village Point Shopping Center, Omaha.